Hello, everyone. Today is another MU chart tier list kind of list thing. But basically, today we're going to be doing a fighting MU chart, and as most of you probably know, I'm arguably one of the. I don't want to gloat myself too much, but I am one of the better fighting users in Monotype, period. So, my opinion on this is pretty significant, and but I will say that I'm definitely not the de facto person to be talking about this, because obviously I'm not the best at the game. There are people that are obviously better than me and might have a little bit more insight, and this is just purely based off of my opinion as well. Um, it is based a little bit on fact and like personal experience, but it's largely my opinion. So this you may not agree with this list, and that's perfectly fine. If you feel like you don't agree with something, just let me know in the comments or let me know on the Showdown or Discord. So without further ado, let's get onto this list. We're going to cover all the types in alphabetical order, just like I did for the tier list. So, without further ado, let's start with Bug. Bug is definitely a well, this is more of a Gen 7 rating. I'd say in this generation, probably not likely. So, obviously, you might be thinking, oh, well, damn, you clearly have access to Terrakion. That mon's broken against Bug. Like, literally, what switches into it? Nothing switches into that thing. You can just sweep the entire type. And while that is slightly true, you forget about the one big thing that Bug has that fighting suffers against immensely, and that is webs. Webs destroys this type. And while we do have Hawlucha to help out a little bit, it still doesn't really help that you have Ribombi as well. You also have access to like a bunch of really ridiculous Pokemon that can just beat fighting offensively a lot. Like Scolipede can sometimes even destroy your entire team once Cobalion is gone. So yeah, no, Bug you can potentially lose like very hard. And I feel like there's too much at stake in this matchup to really call it an even matchup. Because and this is assuming you even run Scarf Terrakion. Some people don't even run Scarf Terrakion like at all. And because of the lack of Infernape, I can't really say like you have a lot of options to deal with it. You kind of have to run Scarf Terrakion, otherwise you kind of just lose to either Bombi, who, granted, isn't as common anymore, and also Volcarona is clearly also a problem, but Scarf Terrakion does take care of that. But yeah, Scarf Terrakion obviously saves this matchup a lot, and because there are Pokemon like Fortress in the game right now, it does. If you do manage to remove webs somehow, or manage to just keep them off the field by winning the speed tie with Cobalion versus Galvantula, I think you will have a chance. The fact that the majority of the game is based off of a 50-50 though is kind of aids, I won't lie. But I think for the most part, you shouldn't have to worry about too much. I definitely do think Hawlucha is also a really big threat for sure. But setting up Hawlucha is actually a little harder than it seems. But I think I am underselling Hawlucha a little bit, so I'll say the matchup is even. But it's really, it can go really wrong. It can go really wrong. Just from personal experience, it can go really wrong. Like one wrong move against Ribombi, and you can just lose the entire game. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, Bug is definitely an even to not likely matchup. Wouldn't really say I'd recommend it. However, for matchups that you can afford to go well against, Dark is definitely one of them. Now, this was definitely in Gen 7 plus 2, but in this generation it's plus 1, and that's mainly because of Grimmsnarl and the prominence of Sableye. So Grimmsnarl is obviously a problem because it can set screens, which is another huge thing that fighting just struggles against is screens. Until we get a screen cleaner, this is always going to be a problem with the type, because while we do have very strong Pokemon, I mean, hell, we got our Shifu this gen, um, our Pokemon struggle immensely with screens, and it just makes it really hard to break through the type, especially when we don't have a defogger, when we don't have someone that can remove screens through screen cleaner or anything like that. And even though we have a mon that has crits, Urshifu only has crits on Wicked Blow, and that's not enough. We also do not have a good Infiltrator mod, so that kind of sucks as well. But yeah, screens, Grimmsnarl kind of makes this harder to win. And also Grimmsnarl in general is just really aids to deal with because of Spirit Break and all that. But once Grimmsnarl is gone, the matchup is relatively bearable. You still have a couple of problematic Pokemon like Mandibuzz, obviously, and also Sableye, as I mentioned before. But if you have Urshifu and like Keldeo and Terrakion all still healthy, the matchup shouldn't be a problem. Because for the most part, those Pokemon take care of everything. And if Cobalion sets up rocks, keeps rocks on the field, and you manage to pivot properly around the team, make sure you don't lose any important Pokemon to Grimmsnarl, the matchup is pretty easy, in my experience. So it's definitely still losable, because Grimmsnarl is a big problem, and screens can make things go awry really quickly. But because of the nature of fighting just being really good against Dark historically, it's still a very winnable matchup. Well, winnable, but not super winnable. It's not free, per se. But yeah, Dark is definitely one of our better matchups. Dragon. Dragon is kind of an even-ish, not likely. It's kind of in the same boat as Bug, because last gen we got completely destroyed by Dragon. This gen, I haven't fought a ton of Dragon with fighting, to be fair. But of the amount I have fought, Dragon's still kind of annoying to deal with, because yeah, they don't have the Lotties anymore, which is obviously a huge deal, because those two guys literally destroyed the entire type, because we didn't have Urshifu back then, and our options for Psychic communities were literally Scrafty and Pangoro, and you already know that those Pokemon were absolute garbage. So yeah, you just suffered against Dragon, and let's not forget that they also had Z Como at the time. They also had Mega Altaria at the time. Ugh, it was a nightmare dealing with that type. I literally had to run Pokemon like Buzzwole just to deal with some of those Pokemon. Like, it was ridiculous. But thankfully, Megas are gone, and Altaria is also gone in general. Also, the Latias are obviously gone for now, but this matchup got a little bit better, I would say. It's still not favorable, because obviously now T-Spike's Dragalge has been surfacing and doing quite a little bit of work on fighting, because T-Spike's, as you know, we don't have hazard immunity, we don't have hazard removal for that. I've been just testing teams with like Hitmontop to see and try and see if that could work, because Hitmontop is actually kind of has Technician, has a few moves that hit pretty hard, but I found in general it's just not that effective at anything except for the fact that it can rapid spin, and that's pretty unfortunate. So if Hitmontop was better, I'd say the Dragon MU would be pretty good, but right now I'd say it's even, because you still got troublesome Pokemon like not Hydreigon, but you got Dragapult, which is really annoying, but Urshifu kind of alleviated that problem a little bit. Likes to ban Sucker Punch, although that does put you in awkward 50-50s sometimes. And most of the Pokemon on Dragon are relatively frail, so you can run over them, but I still feel like Dragapult and Dragapult, Toxic Spikes, and just the offensive nature of Dragon, still a little bit much for fighting to handle, but it's definitely way miles better than it was last gen, and that's why I think it's an even matchup. It's very possible for you to lose, it's very possible for us to win. Now, for matchups that we don't win, we have Electric. If you have Como, you can potentially win this matchup. But without Como, this matchup is basically free for Electric. And since Como isn't that really good of a Pokemon, I really am debating putting this a -2, because basically once they put Electric Terrain up, you have to sack a Pokemon, put in Urshifu, and pray that they're either stupid enough to stay in and Sucker Punch, or you read their switch out and you click Wicked Blow, only for Raichu to come back in later, and then you have to sack another Pokemon. It's a vicious cycle, and it's actually awful. So it really sucks. You literally have to either stall out and kill Pincurchin, which a smart Electric player is never going to let you do that, or you have to somehow miraculously just kill their Raichu like instantly, and they have to be stupid about the matchup. Like, it's really bad what this type can do to you. I honestly think this should be -2, actually. Like, it's the tools to make it winnable are there, because Como definitely destroys the type a little bit, but Raichu is just such a big problem. Yeah, no, I'm gonna put this in -2 because Raichu is really, really a big deal. Like, especially with Rising Voltage now just like completely decimating Terrakion. Like, it's just really bad. It's really bad with the position we're in with this type. Yeah, no, it is just not good to deal with this type as fighting. I mean, last gen it was also kind of problematic because it had Tapu Koko and Raichu Alola was still pretty bad because uh, Stab boosted Thunderbolts and Psychic are not a good combination, and it had Psychic back when we didn't run a Dark immunity. I mean, back when we didn't run a Psychic immunity, so yeah, you would think it would be pretty bad, and it was that bad. Thankfully, Como did save the day a little bit, but it's still not a good matchup. Not at all. Not at all. Without further ado, let's go on to one of our even worse matchups, Fairy. Fairy is definitely the worst matchup for fighting. Actually, I think this should be a Click X type. Yeah, this is a Click X type. Because Electric, you can potentially win if your opponent is an idiot, like I said. But with Fairy, you can literally have a brain dead person playing Fairy against fighting, and you can lose because you got Pokemon like Hatterene, you got Pokemon like Gardevoir, you have Klefki now, you have Azumarill who can just sweep your entire type because we don't have a resist to water, unless it's Como who isn't that good right now. Like, there's so many threats on Fairy. It has literally almost every single thing that fighting hates. You have a resistance to their stab, you have screens, you have hazards, you have access to Thunder Wave, you have access to really bulky, fat Pokemon that can just wall the entire team and set Trick Room. It's a nightmare. It's literally a culmination of everything fighting hates as a type, and you just put it onto one type. And it was just as bad last gen. It was a little winnable last gen because of Pokemon like Buzzwole. Toxicroak also helped out a little bit. Toxicroak still kind of Toxicroak before the DLC kind of destroyed Fairy. Like Scarf Toxicroak absolutely wrecked Fairy because it KO'd almost every single Fairy type, and since no one ran like a poison immunity back then, it was almost like a really, if you had Toxicroak, it was like a winnable matchup. But Toxicroak is completely invalidated by Klefki now, so that is no longer a thing that helps us. And Urshifu doesn't make things any better for this either. So yeah, Fairy, kind of one of the worst matchups we have. It's not good at all, dude. It is just not good. You honestly are just better off saving your time going into a match with someone else if you're clicking on the ladder. Because if you see Fairy, there's a really, really 99% chance that you're probably going to lose. Your opponent has to be really, like, purposely trying to lose, or have, like, the worst team of all time to actually lose fighting versus Fairy. Like, it is so hard to lose with Fairy. It's unreal. It's actually unreal. But yeah, Fairy is just... I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Fire. Fire is a pretty bad type for us to face, I would say. I'm only saying that because... Actually, wait. Oh no, I'm thinking of Fairy still. Yeah, no, Fire is fine as far as I'm concerned. I think Fire is actually kind of... It's between these two. I'm gonna put it in even for now, because Fire players whine and complain about how Terrakion sweeps their entire type, but like, they have Torkoal, so I don't really understand that. They literally have a Pokemon that just rapid spins on us like the entire time. And while I still do see that Terrakion's kind of a problem, actually, yeah, you know what? I'm just being really mean to Fire mains because a lot of people whine about Terrakion just sweeping their team. I've dealt with a few Fire users. I've seen people run literally Scarf Cinderace just to counter Terrakion. He still ended up losing that game, by the way, because he sucks. But yeah, no, I'd say it's probably winnable. I think it's very possible for you to lose though, because Cinderace is an obnoxious Pokemon that can do all sorts of things that are annoying, like court changing your rocks, running a Scarf set, because apparently Scarf isn't that uncommon, and yeah, just being generally annoying. And also Intimidate spam doesn't really help either with Incineroar and such. So I think also missing Stone Edge sucks. So I think it isn't like a free matchup per se, but it's definitely pretty good. Yeah, not really much else to say about Fire. Terrakion just kind of washes this type, and Keldeo doesn't help matters either. You have to be careful with how you use Terrakion, though, so it's not brain dead easy, but it's definitely really easy if you're good with fighting. Next up we have Flying. Flying is also, um, depending on the Flying user, and depending on the Flying team, it can be winnable, or even not good. It really does depend on the team, because, like, say if you ran into, like, balance Flying, like the Conflux team, with a Mantine, Corviknight, and all that. Corviknight is a huge problem for fighting, unless you're running sets that beat it, which really aren't there. It isn't hard to beat that thing for fighting. You have so much taunt spam. It's just a matter of getting that thing low enough to revenge kill, because it does take recoil from Brave Bird. So it's just a matter of finding the right Pokemon, using your taunt spam effectively, and KOing successfully. And because we have Urshifu, we still have more offensive pressure thanks to Sucker Punch. But yeah, in general, fighting has a decent time, depending on the Flying team, of course. We do have a little bit of a rough time with, like, Xatu teams, I believe. Sigil teams are also problematic sometimes. But the lack of hazards, well, actually, no longer because of Skarmory, but I haven't seen a lot of people use Skarmory, to be fair. But yeah, I've seen Skarmory Corviknight teams. That's definitely not fun for fighting to deal with. But even last gen, I would say Flying wasn't that bad of a matchup. On paper, it sounds like it should be really rough, but it's actually not that bad. So yeah, depending on the Flying team and the Flying user, this varies. Because if I was going against Conflux using Flying, I'd definitely say it's an even matchup. If I was up against, like, some Psychic Flying team with Xatu, I'd say it's not likely. But I think the general Flying team, you should be able to be perfectly fine. But yeah, this varies. So I think on average, I'd say it's an even matchup. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that for now, because I can't really comfortably say that it's a very easy winnable matchup, because Corviknight is obviously still problematic, especially if it's played properly. So I think it's very losable, very hard, and you should be careful. Um, Next up, we have Ghost. Ghost is actually not that bad this gen. Ghost used to be one of the absolute bottom 10 click X matchups of the entire generation last gen. Like, it actually, like, was so bad. I started, like, co-maining Dark just because of this type. It was so ridiculous how this type just destroyed us. Like, think of how Fairy destroys us this gen, and think of it, like, 10 times worse. Like, that's what Ghost does. It doesn't have webs, but it does have Mega Sableye, which is basically worse than webs. Mega Sableye essentially just almost invalidated the entire type. And aside from that, it also just burned a lot of things. It could run Mirror Code, so your combo wasn't even safe. Uh, it also has access to other teammates like Jellicent, who's obnoxious for Keldeo to deal with, and also had teammates in actually, I forgot the other defensive Pokemon. Let me go check real quick. But yeah, its defensive core was ridiculous. It was actually kinda nuts. Don't really understand. Like, it really just was not fair at all for us to deal with, at least. Ghost was one of the worst types last gen, though. So, but yeah, looks like it was just Sableye. Oh, I must have been thinking of the Smub team. But yeah, Ghost is just really annoying. Like, really, really annoying for this type. So, yeah, the defensive core is really annoying because Jellicent completely destroys Keldeo, and Mega Sableye just completely walls all of your physical attackers. That was then, though. That's not now, obviously. The reason why it's so much better now is that even though you still have Mimikyu, which is one of the worst Pokemon fighting has to deal with, that problem got slightly alleviated thanks to Urshifu. Urshifu now allows you to actually beat Mimikyu, which is something you didn't have access to before, because once you actually took down Mimikyu's disguise, which wasn't really that hard to do on fighting in the first place, it was just killing it that was really hard. And once you get that disguise down, you instantly win the game. You think I'm kidding, but I'm actually not. Because Mega Sableye is gone, and because we got Urshifu quite literally just clicks Sucker Punch or Wicked Blow against the rest of the Ghost team, and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, it's actually kind of busted. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Ghost mains think that fighting is broken because of Urshifu, because, like, it's ridiculously good against Ghost. Like, this mon, low-key, I think I said this before in my tier list, but, like, Urshifu was the closest thing to the savior of fighting that we have gotten for many generations. I'm not kidding when I say that this mod is probably the best thing that has happened to this type. But, yeah, Urshifu on its own makes Ghost a lot better, and also Jellicent's decline in usage and Terrakion being a little bit no longer being hindered by Mega Sableye kind of helps as well. So because of the absence of a few key Pokemon and because of Urshifu, Ghost is actually a very winnable matchup. Not brain dead easy, obviously, because it is Ghost. It does resist your main stab. Well, not resist. It's immune to your main stab. And Mimikyu is still obviously a problem, because breaking the sub, I make it sound super easy, but sometimes it might cost you a Pokemon or two, so yeah, you have to be careful with Mimikyu still. But I think besides that, Ghost is pretty easy. Pretty fair matchup. Next up we have Grass. Grass. I would say Grass is probably... I put it at even, but I'm not particularly sure, because this isn't a matchup I've seen a ton on the ladder or even in competitive games when I ask for them. It's a particularly strange matchup. I think Sungrass. Okay, so I think I got a better idea of what's going on here now, because like I'm remembering what happened in Gen 7, and it's kind of similar to what happened in this gen. What happens in this gen, with the exception of Sungrass. So I think Sungrass completely destroys us, if I'm not wrong. Because I think +2 Venu outspeeds Terra. No, let me check real quick. Because like I said, I'm not super experienced in this matchup. Because I don't see Grass that often. Let's see. So, we're gonna put up Sun. It outspeeds if it's modest. But if it's plus speed, then yeah, it outspeeds Terrakion. Which is gonna be a problem. But yeah. That aside, it just kind of clicks, its three main moves: Sludge Bomb, Giga Drain. It walls Keldeo with Giga Drain. Sludge Bomb just kind of clicks randomly. Yeah, no, it's kind of, Sungrass is kind of problematic. Yeah, because you just Weather Ball on Cobalion. I think the one thing that makes Sungrass a little bit manageable is that Venu wears himself down. And also, Venu doesn't outspeed Hawlucha, so if you set up Hawlucha properly, you automatically win. So yeah, I think it's definitely an even matchup, because two things can go wrong for you. Things can go wrong for you, but things can also go wrong for the Grass user. It's definitely volatile. One of the most volatile matchups, definitely. I think second to Bug in the amount of volatility that's in the matchup. Because you can be winning one turn, and then they set up Sun, and you can just lose the rest of the game. Like, it's that scary. Yeah, but Grass is definitely one of those volatile matchups. I think Sungrass is definitely the scariest version of Grass for fighting the face, because I think Balanced Grass just gets absolutely hammered by Hawlucha. Even with Grassy Glide, Rillaboom, Hawlucha obviously resists that, so that really doesn't matter. And even at +2, I'm pretty sure it survives. I might be wrong about that, actually. But, yeah, no. For the most part, it shouldn't really matter, because, like, Rillaboom realistically isn't going to set up on anything. Because most of the fighting kind of just threatens it out. And also, Urshifu kind of outspeeds it with its own Sucker Punch. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, grass is definitely a volatile matchup, especially when Sungrass is a thing. So I think it's an even at MU. If you put a fighting user against a grass user, I feel like it could be anyone's game if both of them are of equal skill. So yeah, definitely even. Wouldn't say much else about it. Because Hawlucha is good, but then again, Whimsicott is annoying. Venusaur kind of sweeps your team. Not really much you can do about it. Also, Como is also a big deal, but Whimsicott is a kind of a pain. So depends on the Como set you run. But yeah, grass definitely one of those even MUs, I would say. Very volatile though. Ground, very winnable. Despite it walling Terrakion naturally, you have Keldeo. Keldeo is basically ground's bane. Like, fire whines about Terrakion, ground whines about Keldeo. Like, that's the best way to put it, because Keldeo is a big pain to deal with. Once that thing sets up a Calm Mind, the game's basically over, because, like, it doesn't even matter if you're Gastrodon, doesn't matter if you're Seismitoad, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're Palosand. You might think Palosand would have a decent matchup, but that ability doesn't do jack. Like, I'm not kidding when I say Keldeo destroys this type. Like, especially now that Water MZ isn't even a thing anymore, Keldeo's always running leftovers, and it basically is just never going to get worn down by Sandstorm. And any turn that Sandstorm isn't up and Keldeo is in, it is literally benefiting from leftovers. So it's really crazy how this Pokemon just destroys this type. Now, obviously, it can still get out of hand because Excadrill is still pretty good against fighting in general. Excadrill outspeeds Terragon and Sand, obviously. And Excadrill outspeeds. Okay, I said that twice, but yeah, Excadrill is just kind of really a big threat, especially with Choice Band. Just kind of clicks EQ, but then it has to be careful with Hawlucha. And Hawlucha can be problematic, obviously, but it is what it is. It's definitely a winnable matchup for ground, but I would say fighting has the bigger upper hand here. Definitely has the upper hand. Next up we have Ice. Now, Ice is actually kinda even. Now, not for the reason you might think. So, Ninetales Alola isn't as much of a problem as it used to be last gen, but screens are still annoying. Screens are definitely a big problem for fighting teams, and Ice personifies that, obviously. Once those screens go up, big threats like Mamoswine and even potentially Piloswine can just... Mamoswine, Piloswine, Galarian, Darmanitan, basically, they all become threats. But once Ninetales is gone, and once you have reasonable chip on Avalugg, you completely destroy the type. Like, even without priority, which we needed it last gen to actually do well against Ice, Terrakion just outspeeds and kills most of the type. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. Also, Keldeo is also a big problem, but that's if you get rid of Ninetales, and most of the time they're going to try and save them. So, you really shouldn't worry about it, but yeah, it can go wrong. It can very much go wrong. And there's a lot that can go wrong in this matchup. I wouldn't say it's as volatile as like Bug or Grass, but it's definitely not easy. It takes experience to not mess up this matchup, because you can easily lose if you aren't careful, because Alolan Sandslash, despite how much everyone trashes it, can actually do quite a bit of work on your team, and Hawlucha can't give you an easy free sweep because Ice Shard is everywhere. So you have to be very careful with this type. But that being said, it's still relatively decent MU, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Next up we have Normal. Normal is actually even. Or actually, no, I'd say it's not likely that you win against Normal. Because now I know you're definitely thinking the thing I'm thinking right now, and that's Indeedee, Scarf Indeedee. How do you beat this? Well, Terrakion, after some chip, does KO Indeedee very easily. I'll provide the calc right now. Indeedee, Choice Scarf. We're not using Mega Horn. Actually, some people might use Mega Horn, which solidifies the point, but close combat. Close combat always kills. Even without Jip, it always kills. It's kind of ridiculous. Because Indeedee is not bulky at all. Like, it is just... It is frail as the day is long. But yeah, Indeedee is not that bulky. And because Indeedee isn't that bulky, you still kind of click CC for free against most of the type. Now, the real big kicker is trying not to sack anything to this thing, because you can. Okay, so Beware plus Indeedee is kind of the problem, and also Ditto. So Ditto just denies you setup. Actually, you know what? No, this is an even matchup. I think I was overrating Indeedee a little bit. I better not do that again. Yeah, because I completely forgot Urshifu completely switches into it if it just tries to brain dead click Expanding Force. So yeah, aside from that, yeah, no, fighting can completely destroy this type. I'm debating putting it into +1 because Scarf Terrakion always clicks close combat, and there's nothing Beware can do about it. But it does take 39, or like not a lot of damage from Tarak, and it can just like revenge kill it with Drain Punch back. So the fact that it can even switch into Terrakion is kind of ridiculous, but that's just the GOAT Beware being the GOAT. So I would say though that this matchup probably is definitely hard for the normal user. So I think I would put it in +1. I think it's gonna be +1. It can be +0. Do note that it can be +0, but I think it's +1. And that's mainly because Scarf Terrakion very potent, especially against like any sort of team. Doesn't matter what Pokemon you're running on normal, it's getting smacked by Scarf Terrakion. And if not Scarf Terrakion, one of his buddies in Keldeo, Urshifu, even Hawlucha can like literally sweep your entire team if you're not careful. Or if it's running the Mental Herb set, if Normal's done with the Mental Herb set, it is over, because it can't even like revenge kill with Ditto at that point, because Hawlucha, in case you didn't know, Hawlucha uses Unburden, and because of Unburden, Ditto holds an item and isn't as fast as Hawlucha with Unburden. So fighting's kind of skewed to win if they have a Pokemon that completely invalidates one of the main reasons how normal doesn't get easily swept by opposing types. So yeah, I'd say the matchup is pretty winnable, but it can go wrong because Scarf Indeedee is a threat, don't get me wrong, but if you play properly, you should win. Next up we got Poison. Poison's definitely not one of our favorable matchups because of Galarian Weezing. So Galarian Weezing completely switches into fighting no matter what you do. Yeah, you can send out Cobalion to try and be careful with it, but what's stopping Galarian Weezing from just clicking Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split, switch out into one of its many other walls like Toxapex, put down those Toxic Spikes? It's over, bro. And Hawlucha can't even save you because it has Pokemon like as Gengar to stop close combat setups. And even if you don't run like that, if you run Power Herb like me, you still have to worry about Amoonguss possibly sporing you. You have to worry about Toxapex just sitting on you and clicking Toxic, assuming it's not physically defensive. Most of them are running specially defensive now to deal with rain, but there are still quite a few that are physically defensive. Yeah, I think excuse me. I think it is kind of rough because of Galarian Weezing, think I might be overrating it a little bit though, just a tiny bit, because it does resist your main stab, yes. And Vileplume is kind of a problem, as is Amoonguss. But I think for the most part, I think that this matchup is kind of even. And the reason I think that is because Hawlucha still is a big threat to the team, especially once it gets to +2. Well, yeah, that and Power Herb being really strong against poison in general. I think that and the fact that Keldeo can be kind of dangerous as well. Once Vileplume is gone, it's pretty rough. I won't lie, it's pretty rough. Yeah, I'm really torn on this a little bit, but I think I'm gonna stick with -1 because of Galarian using Vileplume and Toxapex. That core is very hard for fighting to break, so it's very possible for you to win. Like I said, Hawlucha can just kind of threaten the entire type if you get a good switch in, and if you wear down the opponent enough, you can just clean up with Hawlucha. It's winnable, but it's not very likely that you'll win because of the way poison is. So that's not even mentioning that Amoonguss could just put one of your Pokemon out of commission permanently. Well, not permanently, but for a good portion of the game. So such is life. And before you say Urshifu kind of broken, Galarian Weezing completely walls that thing. Like physically defensive Galarian Weezing. It doesn't even need to be physically defensive. It will completely wall it because it completely walls completely walls the fighting stab, and it completely walls Wicked Blow pretty easily because of its fairy typing. So Urshifu is no problem at all, and none of its coverage moves do that much damage to it. So yeah, Poison's kind of a rough matchup. Next up we got Psychic. So you would think that because we got Urshifu this gen, that Psychic would actually be kind of manageable, but Indeedee kind of stops that. So you would be able, if it wasn't for Indeedee, you would be able to spam Sucker Punch so much against Psychic, and you could just do like ridiculous amounts of damage. You could probably sweep the entire type with Urshifu if it wasn't for Indeedee. And that's why I put this in not likely, because, well, it would be a -2. I feel like Indeedee specifically makes this matchup really painful. And if you get rid of that Pokemon, and if you get a good read on him using that Pokemon, or if they're not even Scarf, and if they're Specs, there's a good chance you can win. But it's so slim. It is very slim, and you still have to worry about Gardevoir, Hatterene, Slowbro as well. It's really rough, and Urshifu basically carries you this entire matchup. I wouldn't say it's easy. It's definitely not easy, and it's not even. You have to work really hard to win this, and because of that, it's -1. But you can win. The potential is there. It is viable that you can beat Indeedee by using Terrakion wisely. Also, Terrakion has access to Mega Horn, which does help out a lot in that matchup because it completely decimates Indeedee. Does reasonable chunks of damage to all the other psychic types as well. Yeah, it does decent damage against Jirachi, Celebi, most of the core mainstays of a balanced psychic as well. So yeah, Terrakion, Mecha Horn plus Urshifu, kind of good, but it's not enough to make this an even matchup. It is definitely not in your favor, and I'd recommend, if you're planning on doing this matchup because you think it's very doable, you have to play Urshifu like God, because you will not win if you don't play Urshifu properly, because if you just haphazardly switch it into Indeedee every single time, they will Dazzling Gleam you, and they can't get punished for that play, because Dazzling Gleam still works against your entire team. So you have to play that thing carefully. You have to know exactly what that Indeedee is. If it's Scarf or Specs, you have to know, because that matchup completely revolves around that Pokemon. Once that Pokemon is gone, the entire matchup changes. But while that Pokemon is still alive, matchup is nearly impossible. So, Psychic, very hard. Probably the hardest of the -1s. not exactly electric levels of unwinnable or fairy levels of literally just click X, but I'd say it's pretty decent. Rock. Rock's kind of bad. like, yeah, Rock, not that good at all. Yeah, Rock is pretty bad. Lycanroc does pretty decently against fighting, but it's pretty predictable. Because like it can click close combat, it can click not Accelerock, but it can click Psychic Fangs and close combat. It also learns Play Rough this gen, which is very annoying. But thankfully, most Lycanrocs aren't running that. But for some insane person that really hates fighting, and you know those people are out there, they might be running Play Rough, and that's I don't want to think about that. But yeah. Besides the memes, obviously, to beat fighting with, Lunatone isn't really that much of a problem, even if it gets up webs. Terrakion still completely deals with it, especially rocks. Cobalion also deals with it pretty fine. Keldeo still destroys most of the type. The matchup is still really easy. Very, very free. You have to, I would say it's losable, but it's not losable because of your opponent's skill. It's losable because of potential hacks, most likely. Because this matchup is literally not hard for you to win at all. You should win it like 100% of the time. There's no reason for you to really lose this matchup. Now, are you an idiot for losing this matchup? Probably, but don't feel like absolute dog if you feel like you lost this matchup. Because most of the time, rock players are probably going to account for fighting, and they might have some disgusting C-team tech to try and beat you. And that's fine if you get hit by it, but, like, we all know rock isn't winning. In a realistic setting, if rock was trying to prep for, like, an actual game, rock is not winning against fighting. That is just a fact. It wasn't historically like this. In Gen 7, rock... It's funny how the tables turned, but Rock used to be one of fighting's worst matchups in Gen 7 because Shuckle would just put up webs and Negadiancy would just go to town. Because nothing outsped it, nothing did anything against it, there's nothing you could do. You just kind of clicked X. Best thing you could do is have Lucario on your team, and that mon is not the most viable. Oh yeah, also Lucario exists, so yeah, you have so many options to beat this type, it's not even funny. I don't even need to talk about it anymore. It's literally just open and shut case. Also, Steel, literally free matchup. It wasn't like this before because Aegislash was kind of annoying before, but now that Urshifu's in the game, free matchup. Literally free. I don't even need to talk about it anymore because it's literally free. And that water. Water is not that good for us. Actually, water is really bad. Really, really bad. And here's why. Hurricane Kingdra. That's one thing. Urshifu Surging Strikes. That's another thing. And lastly, the most painful thing of all. Flip Turn and Psychic Fangs. Barrascuda in the rain. Oh, and let's not talk about the fact that a Slowbro is back. Whew. Yeah, water, not that fun to play against. You have so many things that beat you, so many Pokemon, like Toxapex, that just completely beat your team. There's very little you can do to win against this type. And unfortunately, it's one of the most common types at the moment, so you kinda have to take that L. But, yeah, not really much else to say about water. It just kind of offensively with rain, it just completely wears you down. Defensively, if they use bounce teams, they kind of just wear you down. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, you get walled by Toxapex, it puts down Toxic Spikes, or it can just Toxic you, personally, your Pokemon, on its own. It also has access to Keldeo, obviously, but I think people are running Urshifu instead of Keldeo instead, which is fine, but Yeah, it still has the option to run Keldeo. Urshifu is also a big problem. Slow King, Slow Bro, really obnoxious Pokemon. Stall doesn't do too well against fighting because of Urshifu. Yeah, I'd say it doesn't do well because of Urshifu, because Urshifu is kind of a big problem for Stall, because it literally auto-crits a bunch of their mons. Kinda not a good look, but yeah, aside from Stall, and Stall is a viable archetype, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because Water Stall is very much viable. It has been used in MPL to great success. Do not think that it's not viable. It is a viable playstyle right now. Um, and yeah, fighting can deal with it slightly, but not completely. Uh, but yeah, rain and balance completely destroy fighting. Absolutely. Is the matchup winnable? Yes, a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's very easy. It is a very uphill climb, just as rough as electric. Not as rough as fairy. There's definitely some winnable content there because, as I said, Hawlucha, fantastic Pokemon. It can win you matches for free if you set it up properly. We can Toxapex properly. If things go your way, if you get a little bit lucky with flinching with Sky Attack, the matchup can be won. It is possible, but it's going to be the hardest thing you do. If you play smart, you can win, but playing smart, even in a matchup like this, might not help you all the time. It's actually kind of rough. But yeah, playing smart against water will help you, but it's not easy. Kingdra, Hurricane, whew, it's just rough. But yeah, that will be the end of my matchup chart. So as you can see, fighting has pretty decent matchups against most of the lower tier types. A lot of the lower tier types, mid tier types, it does pretty well against. Doesn't really have that many, besides like maybe Ghost and Fire and maybe Dark. Doesn't really have that many high tier matchups. Uh, High tier favorable matchups, that is. And it struggles against some of the most common types in the game, like Psychic, Water, Electric, not a good look. Also, Fairy is very popular as well. So, the fact that it's weak to those types is kind of one of the main reasons why people don't think it's that good. But yeah, as you can see by this MU chart, fighting does well as a ladder type, I think, because you do have decent matchup spread against most types, and you do have enough variety to actually try and cover some of your bases with some of these less favorable matchups. But I'd say for the most part, I'd say as a tournament type, fighting is not good to bring because it's not good against some of the best types in the metagame, and it doesn't really have the counterplay or surprise factor to actually be worth bringing because there's no top types that it outright beats. So you shouldn't, if you're trying to bring an anti-meta type, it has to beat a really good type. That's why Grass was good last gen, because it beat Fairy really hard. But fighting doesn't have that kind of matchup in this generation, and that's why it's kind of struggling right now. But we'll see as the meta progresses if the matchups improve over time, or if tournament usage or if tournament sets become more standardized. Things can change. The meta can change. But for now, that will be the end of this video. I hope you guys liked it. If you like content like this, I'll be doing tier lists and MU charts all the time because I know all the types very well. But I know fighting particularly well because I have a history with it. Besides that, I hope you guys all enjoyed. Subscribe for more. This is Namernan, and I hope you all have a great day.